Well, the original Emerald Tablet. There's an Emerald Tablet of Hermetic tradition. You had asked me what the deal is with Billy Carson. Billy Carson wrote a book, The Emerald Tablets of Thoth.
But I keep looking at this all day, and we keep putting it off. We got the Emerald Tablet. I showed it in the first episode. It's very cool. Like, you guys can't really see on camera right here, but it's like when you put it under the light, it's translucent. So what am I looking at here?
What you're looking at, Julian, is a replica of the Emerald Tablet. You're looking at the Emerald Tablet. Well, not exactly the Emerald Tablet, because there is no Emerald Tablet. We don't even know if a physical Emerald Tablet ever existed in the first place. So what is this? This is, one, it's written in Phoenician dialect, which reads from right to left. And the reason for that is because around the time that we think the Emerald Tablet was conceived, this is what the way stonecutters would have likely been using it in that region around the Mediterranean, probably would have been Phoenician dialect if it had existed. And based on several accounts that we have of the Emerald Tablet, how the glass looked melted and stuff, this was crafted. This was commissioned by an artist. It was sanctioned by the International Alchemy Guild, and originally, it was an operative alchemist, one of the few people that is still performing actual alchemy or has and studied alchemy in Prague, and author Dennis Hauck. If you want to learn about the Emerald Tablets, you can go to the academic sources, or if you want to get a more easier to understand version, you don't want to dig through all the text, you don't go to Billy Carson. You go to Dennis Hauck. Right. You come to Anyextee.
We had started to talk about this in the first episode and got off it. So that's a good refresher here. But what were Carson's? Carson said there's multiple tablets. Number one, yeah. Right. And what are the other issues with his claims?
Okay, so let's distinguish. And I was the first person on YouTube to make this distinction and call out, I didn't actually call out his name, but I had talked to him at the time. And if you go back, there's a lot of researchers on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok now. They're all saying the same thing, that it came from my original research. I was the first one to publish a video on this almost half a decade ago on the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean Priest King, versus the Emerald Tablet. I wanted to make a clear distinction because I was one of the first people taking photos of the Emerald Tablet online. If you go back and you Google search Emerald Tablet, years ago, I was the only game in town. All the images of the Emerald Tablet was me. It's my hand holding the tablet in my backyard. And you would see those images in blog articles, thumbnails on YouTube. None of these people have ever reached out and asked me if they could use it. And I don't mind because I don't really care much about ownership mentality. I never got the credit, but I was one of the first ones putting that image out there. But what I noticed is a lot of them were referring to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, when they're using my image. And I'm like, I had already known because I had done the research, as I was confused in the beginning. I had an interest in alchemy in the Hermetic tradition. And so I became in Rosicrucianism, which is an heir to the alchemical tradition. And so I started studying, in fact, at the Rosicrucian museum, there's an entire alchemy exhibit that goes through the whole alchemical process, all the stages. They've got all these artifacts in there. And they have the Emerald Tablet replica on display because the Emerald Tablet is a fascinating and deeply mysterious piece of philosophical, history. It is the basis of the Western esoteric tradition.
Why do we say that?
We say it because it's at the basis of the Hermetic tradition, which gives way to the alchemical tradition and then alchemy, and percolates all the way through the mystery schools to all the way down into the Renaissance, when they start bringing these ideas back out, esoteric ideas, right on down to the turn of the century, when you have like the Golden Dawn and esoteric organizations, into modern day Rosicrucian and Freemasonry. It's come down a long line. Many of the alchemists in the medieval ages referenced the Emerald Tablet. In fact, they had copies of the text. They would hang copies of the text. They would all have the Emerald Tablet. It's so important because it serves as the basis for alchemy and the Hermetic tradition, which basically is the big part of the root of Western esoteric, traditions. And why is it the basis? Because it's not even so much the tablet itself. It's what's on it. It's what it says. In fact, you could probably pull up a translation. There's been many translations. Many scholars throughout antiquity have translated the Emerald Tablet. And so this is good. Dennis William Hauck is a good translation. This is more current. I've done one too. I can't transliterate because I don't know how to read Phoenician, but through interpreting the principles. I've done my own translation, but this one is very good, right? It talks about in truth without deceit. So it's saying this is true. There's several rubrics on here, and each one of them is part of the alchemical stages of alchemy. And that parallels, in a sense, stages of cosmology. I keep using the word cosmology. Some people might not know what that is. Cosmology, study of the universe. It's the story of coming into creation. It's the 1 becomes the 2, into the 3, to the 4, to the 5, to all the way up to the 10, and return to source, right? So how we come into creation. And so the story of the Emerald Tablet, the original Emerald Tablet, there's an Emerald Tablet of Hermetic tradition. You had asked me what the deal is with Billy Carson. Billy Carson wrote a book, The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, or I don't know if that's the exact title, but it's about the Emerald Tablet, a compendium to the Emerald Tablets, where Billy Carson claims to have deciphered the ancient texts and writes about them in his book. Well, I've looked at the book. Aside from all the grammatical errors and what appears to be a bunch of cut and paste blog articles, which don't provide any support to his overall thesis. A lot of interesting information. So you read it, and it's like a yes ladder in politics. A yes ladder is when a politician's running, and they're like, are you tired of paying taxes?
Yeah.
Are you tired of not listening to the Julian Dorey podcast? Well, vote, vote for me. And, it's a yes ladder. Well, alternative historians will do the same thing. They'll plant seeds of truth. They'll sprinkle in universal truths, and then it'll be easier to accept an idea after you've gone, yes, this sounds fascinating. Yes, this is what I believe. Yes, this resonates with me. And so there's a lot of information in his book that doesn't actually support the actual thesis. The problems I have, the issues that I take with his work is that it was 2018. I think the book was just published, and he was on a radio show, Jimmy Church radio show, and he said, Sir Isaac Newton translated the Emerald Tablets.
This is where we were in the last episode that we got off. So let's go.
Tablets, plural. And I drew that distinction early on because a lot of people didn't know the difference. Emerald Tablet, Emerald Tablets, what's the Emerald Tablets of Thoth? What is all of this? So let's set the record straight today, okay? The Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean is a book that came out in the early 20th century. It was written around 1926. It might have got republished a little later. You had to change it. It was by an author named Maurice Doreal, or in some instances, he refers to himself as Dr. Doreal. Although he's not a doctor, he never even got a PhD, barely graduated high school. He said he was a child prodigy, but that's not what his grades reflected. He also said he had been to Egypt, and where the priests in the pyramid, he connected with them about the Emerald Tablet, where they're hiding the Emerald Tablet. But it comes out later, and I had done some extensive research on this. It turns out he'd never been to Egypt. He has no stamps in his passport. His wife or significant other at the time ended up exposing him later and being like, this guy's never been to Egypt.
Don't you hate that?
Oh, yeah.
God, they go bad, don't they?
We know that Doreal, and more than that, something I can bring to the table, this hasn't really been covered anywhere else. You're going to hear this for the first time on the Julian Dorey podcast.
Another exclusive, baby.
I found in the archives at the Rosicrucian headquarters in San Jose, there's something that was known as the journals. This was for the Rosicrucians will publish a publication known as the Digest, and you don't have to be a member of the order to get the digest. They're for free. The Rosicrucians make so much literature free online that most of the secrets are out. You just got to look for them. But they had a journal. So this was for members, actual initiated members who are, Rosicrucians. And this journal it's proprietary. It stays within the organization. I'm letting the secrets out. But in the interest of fairness, shout out to my friends at the Rosicrucians, they have now made this available in their library, which is now open to the public, so anyone can gain access to this today. And in those journals, we can look back, and there's actually accounts from Harvey Spencer Lewis, the first imperator, writing commentaries about Doreal, the author of the Emerald Tablets, about how there's been a lot of claims, how there's a guy that's moved to Colorado, and how he is a former Rosicrucian, and how he was high up in the Rosicrucian order, and he's starting his own mystery school. And they refuted everything. Basically, Doreal probably became a Rosicrucian in the beginning, stole a lot of the secrets, ran off to Colorado, maybe to appeal to a bunch of soccer moms, I don't know, like Gaia. And so, more credulous audience. And so, who just want to,
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Yeah, so basically, he first tells everybody that they got to come to his compound, his mystery school, because the world's going to end and they'll only be safe with him. And he wrote a bunch of different things, you know, and that time came and passed. Nothing happened. He was trying to compete. Doreal was trying to compete with the Rosicrucians, who were a big initiatic esoteric order at that time. He was trying to make his own version of the Rosicrucians. And there's a concept in esoteric traditions known as the Great White Brotherhood. It's much deeper and philosophical. It's like Atlantis.
Sounds a little.
It does. It's terrible because people will think
about that one.
it's like the Ku Klux Klan. That's not what's going on here. Although in some cases, to be fair, there were certainly racist ideologies in Western esoteric traditions.
You don't say. I would have never guessed.
Yeah. Well,
No
you know,
way.
people were racist at that time.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So, and still are. And in fact, many of us are today. Racism is such an interesting thing because, you know, who really gets to define and draw the line? Like, you know, we all come up in a social construct. You know, I don't consider myself racist. I grew up in a multicultural neighborhood, but I would also say that there's aspects of me because of conditioning and through society that I may be viewing the world based on some of these old ideologies. We get conditioned. And so racism can be very subtle. So you might not, you know, like somebody of another color intentionally, but, you know, there could be things that you do that could be likened to it. Anyway,
I see what you're
whole
saying.
other subject. Yeah. So there were these racist ideologies and concepts in esotericism, but it isn't about that. The white light, it's the light and the dark. It's not about race. So although there's been a lot of instances in the Western esoteric space where people tried to say, you know, there's a Aryan or, you know, white progenitors, bearded white men who traveled the earth, and they're the ones who taught everybody about pyramids and seeded the culture. And anyway, so Doreal, Harvey Spencer Lewis, in Parody of the Rosicrucians, writes about Doreal basically being a charlatan. Literally calls him out for the order and is like, you know, and then Doreal finds out about it, writes to the Rosicrucians, oh no, that's not me. It's not me. It was him. And then Harvey Spencer Lewis addresses that. We've known all along that he's defected from an esoteric tradition, tried to create his own tradition, and borrowed the concepts of Western principles in Western esoteric societies and put that into his book, what she calls the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean Priest King. There are no tablets. It's a book from the 1920s into the 1930s that a man who was trying to create a mystery school and make money off of this created a book called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean Priest King. And he ties it to Thoth because Thoth is heralded in esoteric tradition because he was the principle of cosmic wisdom. He was Jehuti. He was the god of the scribes, you know, the intelligent one. And so, you know, Doreal would be familiar with the works of Mladen Blavatsky and many others. In fact, there's cases where it looks like he kind of plagiarized some of these works, maybe changed a word or two around a little bit. But for the most part, he's basically lifting knowledge that already exists, principles, putting them into his book, calls the book the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, claims that it came from the priests in Egypt, that they were hiding, you know, those tablets in the pyramid, and none of that.
Fast and loose with the truth.
Fast and loose with the truth. And then he gets called out by the wife, and then the story changes. He channeled it. And then, you know, now they're channeled. Some people will argue, hey, I've read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. I did too. I read them very early on before I even knew about Dr. Maurice Doreal, whose real name is actually Claude Dawkins.
Oh.
So his name isn't his name. He's not a doctor. He doesn't have the education he
Doreal
claims.
sounds better.
He hasn't. Yeah, well, that's a pen name he wants to go by. We'll respect that. I'm Anyextee. I would appreciate if you refer to me as Anyextee. So, and it's not uncommon in esoteric tradition to have a pen name, you know.
Right.
We talked about that earlier. Aristotle, a lot of these guys. Anyway, a lot of these apocryphal works are groups of people writing under one school of thought. So I'm not mad at that, you know, the name thing, but there is, you know, the idea that he plagiarized a lot of stuff, took ideas, put them in his book, and then he's claiming that he went to Egypt. He never did. He had and there's a whole story to it. Long story short, Billy Carson, who's interested in ancient aliens and sees himself being on the TV show one day, is online, starts his Forbidden Knowledge Instagram page, which I've been following very early since the beginning. Like I said, back in 2014, 15, Billy started coming into our Adept Initiates group on Facebook when it was active. It's kind of defunct now. And so he started seeing a lot of these esoteric ideas and probably came across this stuff. And there were sites like crystallinks.com, which he cites as a source. Crystallinks.com Esoteric.com was a site that took a bunch of the work of alternative historians and put it, online. So if you want to learn about anything, it's all there. But a lot of it is not good scholarship. It's just what alternative opinions, basically. And that's where you find information about, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth and stuff. So I think that Billy had likely found information online, didn't do real research, didn't do academic research. I'm willing to bet Carson probably doesn't even know who Homeyard is or who Ruska is. And these are the scholars, the academic scholars. I've never heard him reference these people. And these are the guys that worked on the Emerald Tablet. And so, what he does in his book, it's supposed to be a compendium of the Emerald Tablets, and he claims that Thoth is an alien entity, and that the Emerald Tablets have this stupendous history that goes back 30,000 years, 35,000 BC, and that Thoth built the pyramids and designed the tablets and hid the tablet in the pyramid and then spread other tablets out, and it's all based on Doreal's book. He took the information, which is a sham itself. Yeah. It's not a verifiable source. Not once have I heard Billy Carson actually cite anything from the academic sources, the actual scholars who worked with the original. Well, one, he can't on the Emerald Tablets because there is none. There's no study around the Emerald Tablets of Thoth because it's the figment of the imagination of Doreal. In the interest of fairness, people will read the book and be like, but I read some powerful stuff. I learned a lot from those, as I did, because it has universal principles in there. Doreal took the information from esoteric organizations and put it in his book. So there's good information in there, but the narrative itself is not actually verifiable at all. It didn't exist. I would challenge any viewer right now to go out and find a single written account anywhere in the world that mentions the Emerald Tablets, plural, before 1928. You won't. Because on this planet, there isn't a single reference to Emerald Tablets because it was created by one guy.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.